So something happened recently that's been sitting in my head, and I couldn't not talk about it. A friend of mine, someone I've known since middle school, someone I grew up with, just got married. And before you say anything, no, this isn't a sad video. I'm genuinely happy for him. He seems happy, his partner seems happy. The whole thing looks right for where he is in life right now. But here's the thing, we're the same age, like exactly the same generation, born within the same few years, grew up in the same era, listened to the same music, played the same games. Gen Z, both of us. And yet, when I found out he got married, my immediate reaction wasn't, oh, nice. It was something closer to, wait, really? Already? And that reaction, that slight surprise, made me want to dig into something, because I think it reveals a lot about how differently Gen Z is experiencing this stage of life, and specifically about what marriage means for our generation now versus what it used to mean. Here's a bit of context, because I think it matters for what I'm trying to say. My friend went a different route than me after school. He finished vocational school, what in Indonesia we call SMK or Sekolah Menengah Kejuruan, and went straight into the workforce. He started working as a security guard right after graduating. No university, no gap year, no extended period of figuring himself out. He just went and built something. I took the university path, still in it, still working toward a degree, still in the phase where the future feels more like a concept than a plan, still figuring out a lot of things. And neither of those paths is wrong. That's actually one of the things I want to make really clear in this video, because I think there's a tendency, especially among people who went to university, to unconsciously treat the academic path as the default correct one and everything else as a deviation. That's not how it works. My friend built financial stability earlier than I did. He entered adulthood, in the practical, bills and responsibilities sense, earlier than I did. And so when he reached a point where marriage made sense for his life, he had the foundations under him to actually take that step. Whereas me, I'm still building the foundations. And I think that's true for a lot of Gen Z who took longer educational paths, not because we're behind, but because the path we chose has a different timeline. So let's zoom out from my personal situation for a moment and look at what's actually happening with Gen Z and marriage as a whole. Because my friend and I aren't just two individual people making different choices, we're also part of larger patterns. The average age of marriage has been rising consistently for decades. In most developed countries, and increasingly in developing ones too, people are getting married later than their parents did, and significantly later than their grandparents did. For Gen Z specifically, who are currently in their late teens to late 20s, the marriage rate is lower than any previous generation was at the same age. Now, one way to read that is Gen Z doesn't value marriage, but I don't think that's quite right. Most surveys show that the majority of Gen Z still wants to get married at some point. The desire hasn't disappeared. What's changed is the timeline, the conditions, and the level of intentionality around it. Gen Z's waiting longer because the foundations that marriage traditionally rested on, financial stability, housing, a clear sense of your own identity and direction, are taking longer to build, not because of laziness or avoidance, because the world they're building those foundations in is more expensive, more uncertain, and more complex than it was when their parents were the same age. So the delay isn't a rejection of marriage, it's a response to real conditions. Let's talk about the practical side of this, because I think it's easy to discuss marriage as a purely emotional or values-based decision, without acknowledging how much the financial reality shapes it. A generation ago, someone in their early 20s with a stable job, even a modest one, could reasonably build towards housing, towards starting a family, toward the infrastructure that a committed partnership needs to actually function well. The math worked, the path was visible. For most Gen Z today, that path is significantly murkier. Housing costs have outpaced wage growth dramatically. Education debt is a starting condition for many of us, not something we can avoid. Entry-level jobs often pay less in real terms than equivalent jobs paid a generation ago, while the cost of the basics, rent, food, transportation, healthcare, has gone up. My friend, by going into the workforce early and building financial stability over several years before getting married, actually put himself in a stronger position for that commitment. He had time to save, to establish himself, to reach a point where marriage was something he could support practically, not just emotionally. For those of us on longer educational tracks, with later entry into stable income, and with more financial uncertainty in our early adult years, the timeline for reaching that same position is naturally longer. It's not about wanting it less, it's about the conditions for doing it well arriving later. But it's not only about money. I think there's also a genuine shift in how Gen Z thinks about what marriage is for and what it should look like. Previous generations often approach marriage as something you did at a certain age because that was the next step. It was expected. It was the social script. You finished school, you got a job, you found a partner, you got married. The sequence was the thing, and deviating from it required explanation. Gen Z has grown up with a much more diverse set of examples. They've seen marriages that lasted and marriages that fell apart. They've seen people who married young and were happy, and people who married young and spent years rebuilding afterward. They have more access to different models of relationships and different ideas about what a life can look like. And I think a lot of Gen Z has internalized something that sounds simple but is actually quite significant. Marriage should be a deliberate choice, not a default outcome. It should happen because two specific people have built something real together and are ready to commit to continuing that, not because it's the next box to tick. That's a higher standard than previous generations were typically held to, and I don't think it's a bad one. A generation that takes marriage seriously enough to wait until it's genuinely right, financially, emotionally, relationally, might produce fewer marriages overall, but more durable ones. My friend getting married now in the way he did with the foundation he built, that looks like exactly that, a deliberate choice made from a position of real readiness. So back to the question this video started with, is marriage unimportant for Gen Z? My honest answer is no. I don't think Gen Z thinks marriage is unimportant. I think Gen Z thinks it's important enough to take seriously. And taking it seriously means not rushing it for the wrong reasons. The people who say Gen Z doesn't value marriage are often reading the statistics, lower marriage rates, older average marriage age, as a sign of disengagement. But I think there's another reading. A generation that's less willing to marry for the sake of following a social script might actually value the institution more, not less, because they're refusing to do it casually. What's changed isn't the significance of marriage. What's changed is the conditions under which it happens and the expectation that it should happen on a particular timeline, regardless of whether the person is actually ready. And here's the thing about different paths within the same generation. My friend's readiness and my readiness are not on the same schedule. His path got him to a point of stability and relational clarity earlier than mine will get me there. That doesn't mean he's ahead of me, it means we're on different roads that both lead somewhere real. Comparing timelines across different life paths is almost always misleading. He didn't beat me to marriage, he reached a milestone on his path. I'm still traveling mine. I want to end this with something simple. To my friend, congratulations. Genuinely, you built something real and you took a step that takes courage. I hope it's everything you're hoping for. And I think you went into it with your eyes open and your foundation solid. That matters. And to everyone watching this who's at a different point in their own path, whether you're still in school, still building financial stability, still figuring out who you are or what you want, that's okay. The fact that someone your age just hit a milestone you haven't reached yet doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're on a different road. Marriage, if it's something you want, will be available to you when you're genuinely ready for it. And genuinely ready means something different for everyone. It means different things depending on your path, your circumstances, your values, and the person you end up building something with. The worst version of this is rushing into it because you saw someone else get there first and felt the pressure. The best version is arriving at it when it actually makes sense for your life and your relationship, whenever that is. I don't know when that'll be for me, but I know it's not something I need to figure out by comparing my timeline to anyone else's. Drop a comment and let me know where you're at with this. Are you someone who wants to get married young? Someone who wants to wait? Someone who isn't sure yet? I genuinely want to hear it. This is a conversation worth having. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of content, and I'll see you in the next one.